Good day and welcome to Scriptures Unlocked. This will be the final presentations in the series on the mark of the beast. This presentation will be taking a look at the mark of the beast and the seal of God. It will be done in two parts. In part one, I'll examine and show that the mark of the beast is a counterfeit to the seal of God. I'll also look at some parallels as to how the devil has been counterfeiting the ministry of God and his Son throughout the plan of salvation. Thirdly, I'll also prove and show that the conflict in the mark of the beast crisis is over the law of God. Broadly speaking, it's over the law of God. It's also about the first table of the law. But more specific, it's about a particular commandment in the law. And finally, I will also show why is it that we worship God and why is it that the Sabbath, which is the seal of God, is so important to God. So throughout this series, it has been established that the central issue around which the mark of the beast revolves is worship. It's about who we worship, when we worship, and how we worship, because all points to whose authority we will obey. So this presentation is about the mark of the beast and the seal of God. Satan's ultimate goal is to be worshipped as God. And he has established a counterfeit system of worship built around Sunday, which is also known as the day of the sun. Notice that God gives us an insight into the mind of the devil while he was in heaven. Isaiah 14 verse 12 onwards tells us this. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. That's where God's throne is located. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, above the angels, because the clouds are a symbol for the angels. And notice what he ultimately wanted to do. He said, I will be like the Most High. So he wanted to be like God the Father. Notice also when Christ, the Son of God, came on earth. Notice how the devil, who was then cast out of heaven, tried to tempt Jesus, and notice what he wanted from Jesus. Luke 4, verse 5 to 7 tells us this. And the devil, taking him, that's Jesus, up into a high mountain, showed unto him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. And the devil said unto him, notice what he said, all this power will I give thee, and the glory of them, for that is delivered unto me, and to whomsoever I will, I give it. And then notice what he wanted in exchange for giving Jesus all the kingdoms of the world. If thou therefore wilt worship me, all shall be thine. So it is clear that the devil's ultimate goal is to be worshipped as God. And the devil here wants to be worshipped as God because he said in his heart, I will be like the Most High. However, the devil knows that the Christian community will not readily and openly worship him as God. So what has he done? Satan, therefore, has put in place a representative, the Pope, so that he can obtain worship by proxy. And the dragon, who Revelation 12 tells us is the devil, gave the papacy his power, his seat, and great authority. That's according to Revelation 13. But notice what we are told by God in the scriptures. Paul said this to the Thessalonians in 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 3 and 4. Paul says, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first. The Greek word there for falling away is apostasia, from which we get our English word apostasy. And that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. So the son of perdition ultimately is the devil, but here the devil is using a proxy, the papacy, to achieve worship. So notice what Paul goes on to say. So this son of perdition, this man of sin, opposed and exalted himself above all that is called God, or that is worship, because worship is the issue at play. So that he as God sitteth in the temple of God in the church, showing himself that he is God, which is what Satan wants to be like, God. Viewers, Satan has been using the first beast, that's the papacy, to achieve his purposes. And he will also use a second beast, that's America, but in particular, apostate Protestantism in America, because the churches in America will lobby for the state for there to be a union of church and state. And this union will usher in the mark of the beast crisis upon the world. And this will all be centered around Sunday observance. Notice what you are seeing on screen here, the similarity between the seat of government of both the beast, the first beast, which is the papacy, and the second beast, which is America. Notice the similarity in the architectural design of these two seats of government. So here you are seeing the Vatican, which is the seat of the beast, the seat of the papacy, with its dome architectural design, along with an obelisk in the center of St. Peter's Square. And notice how America is also designed. The Capitol, which is in Washington, D.C., also has a dome architectural design. It also has an obelisk known as the Washington Monument. So Mystery Babylon, as the Roman Catholic Church is called in Revelation chapter 17, is a system based on sun or Baal worship. So that is what the devil has been doing, and that is what he will do in the future. So Rome and Washington are a mirror image of each other. They are designed the same way, and both beasts will unite to usher in the mark of the beast crisis upon the world. Viewers, there's always been a very close relationship between the leaders of the first beast, that's the Pope of Rome, and the leaders of the second beast, that's the President of America, over the years. And in fact, there have been 31 meetings between 6 popes and 14 presidents in the last century and more. Here are the meetings between the Pope and the US presidents. The first meeting took place on January 4, 1919, at the Apostolic Palace in Rome, when Woodrow Wilson, the President of the United States then, met with Benedict XV. So this was the first meeting between the incumbent President of the United States and the reigning Pope. The third meeting took place on July 2nd, 1963, when John F. Kennedy, who was a Roman Catholic president, met the head of the Catholic Church. So when John F. Kennedy met the Pope, this was the first ever meeting between a Roman Catholic US president and the Pope. The fourth meeting took place on the 4th of October, 1965 in New York, when Lyndon B. Johnson met with Paul VI. And this was the first papal visit to the United States. So the first beast, the head of the first beast, met with the head of the second beast in New York. And the Pope also addressed the United Nations on that particular visit. And here are the other meetings. On June 4th, 2004, President Bush, that's George W. Bush, presented Pope John Paul II with the Presidential Medal of Freedom. So this shows the close ties that America has had with the papacy. And the last meeting between a US president and the Pope took place on October 29, 2021, the Vatican City, when Joe Biden, who is also a Roman Catholic, met with the Pope. And this meeting occurred during President Biden's visit to Italy and the United Kingdom. Here on screen, you're also seeing 3 presidents, one current president, that's George W. Bush, and 2 former presidents, George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton, paying their last respects, bowing down and paying homage at the funeral of Pope John Paul II. So this shows you, viewers, that there's always been a close relationship between the first beast, the papacy, and the second beast of Revelation 13, United States of America. So they are here paying their respects, bowing down and paying homage to the Pope who died. Viewers, Satan's counterfeit system of worship is diametrically opposed to the true worship of the Creator. Here are a few parallels between the ministry of Christ and the mission of the Antichrist, which shows how the devil operates in gaining worship. Jesus represents and receives authority from God the Father, while the papacy represents and receives authority from the dragon, who is Satan, according to Revelation 13, verse 2. Notice what we are told about Jesus' authority. Jesus himself tells us where his authority is derived. Matthew 28, verse 18 tells us this. And Jesus came and spake unto them, saying, all power, or in other words, all authority is given unto me in heaven and in earth. The question is, who gave him that authority? His Father. Notice John 12:49 as well. Jesus said this, for I have not spoken of myself, but the Father which sent me, he gave me a commandment, what I should say and what I should speak. So Jesus speaks for his Father. His authority is derived from God the Father. The dragon, on the other hand, has given his authority to the beast, the papacy. So when the papacy speaks, the Pope speaks on behalf of his father, the devil, because he is being used by the devil to counterfeit the ministry of Christ. The second parallel to be drawn is this. Jesus resembles his father, while the beast resembles the dragon. Notice what we are told in Hebrews 1, verse 1 to 3 about Jesus' resemblance of his father. Hebrews 1, verse 1 says this, God, who is the Father, who at sundry times and in divers manners spake in times past unto the fathers by the prophets, hath in these last days spoken unto us by his Son, whom he hath appointed heir of all things, by whom also he made the worlds, who being the brightness of his glory and the express image of his person. So Jesus Christ, the Son of God, is the express image of his Father's person. So he resembles the Father. Notice now how the dragon and the beast are described in a similar way. Revelation 12, verse 3 speaks about the dragon, the red dragon, who is Satan. And there appeared another wonder in heaven. And behold, a great red dragon. Notice how he's described, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So the dragon has 7 heads and 10 horns. Notice now the beast, the first beast, which is the papacy, in Revelation 13, verse 1, how he is described. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, John said, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So the beast, the papacy, resembles the dragon. The third parallel is this. Christ received worship after his resurrection, and so does the beast after his deadly wound was healed. Notice what we are told in Luke 24, verse 51 and 52. And this is after Jesus' death, burial, resurrection. He was about to ascend into heaven. And it came to pass, while he blessed them, he was parted from them and carried up into heaven. And they worshipped him and returned to Jerusalem with great joy. So Jesus received worship after his resurrection. Notice that the beast, who is counterfeiting the ministry of Christ, will also receive worship after he was revived. Because remember, the beast got a deadly wound in 1798. Revelation 13, verse 3 says this. And I saw one of his heads, that's one of the heads of the beast, because remember he had 7 heads, as it were wounded to death. And his deadly wound was healed. So the papacy who received a deadly wound was revived starting in 1929 with the Lateran Accord. And all the world wondered after the beast. And notice what happens now. Verse 4. And they worshipped the dragon, because the dragon is the one that is ultimately getting the worship, but he's using the beast as a proxy. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. So you realize that the dragon is the one that is in control of the beast, who is using the beast, because he's the one that gave power to the beast. Similar to how Jesus said, all power has been given unto me in heaven and in earth by God the Father. The dragon, who is Satan, now gives power to this beast. And notice what happens. And as a result of that, and they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? The fourth parallel is this. Both Christ and Antichrist will be given worldwide dominion. Notice what we are told about Jesus Christ receiving his dominion at the end of the world. Daniel 7 verse 13 and 14 tells us this. Daniel was given a vision, and I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man, that's Jesus Christ. He's both the Son of Man and the Son of God. And he came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, that's God the Father. And they brought him near before him. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him, or in other words, worship him. So notice now, the beast, the papacy, will also be given dominion by the dragon. Revelation 13 verse 7. And it was given unto him, that's the beast, to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations, similar to what happened in Daniel 7 verse 14. Jesus was given dominion over all people. The beast will be given power over all kindreds and nations and languages. Tongues is another term used for languages. So it is clear so far, viewers, that the Antichrist power, the papacy, is counterfeiting the ministry of Christ. And just as how Christ is to be worshipped, the devil wants to be worshipped. The final parallel I'll draw is this. Both God and the beast will have a seal and a mark, which is linked to obedience and worship. Notice Revelation 7 verse 2 and 3, which speaks about God having a seal. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. So God does have a seal. And he cried with a loud voice to the four angels whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. Viewers, it is important to note from this verse that having the seal of God, the seal of the living God, is a means of protection, because notice what the verse says in verse 3, that the angels were not supposed to hurt the earth, the sea, and the trees. That's the entire domain, earthly domain, until we have sealed the servants of our God in their forehead. So they will be protected because they have been sealed. Notice now Revelation 13 verse 16, which speaks about the beast having a mark, and he will force people to receive a mark. And he, that's the second beast of Revelation 13, which is the United States, apostate Protestantism in the United States. This beast power, this nation who will lead the world into the mark of the beast crisis, cause it all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, that's everybody in the world, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. So both God and the beast have a mark or a seal. And just to make the point clear, the word seal and mark can be used interchangeably. A seal is a sign, it's a token, it's a mark of authority, it's a mark of identification, and it can be used to provide protection. So both God and the beast will have a mark or have a seal. So viewers, notice that both the seal of God and the mark of the beast are placed in their foreheads, in the foreheads of individuals. Why? Because the frontal lobe of the brain is the organ of the mind, and that's where conscious decisions are made. So every single individual on earth will have to make a choice, either to accept the seal of God or receive the mark of the beast. Viewers, the conflict between the mark of the beast and the seal of God has to do with these issues. It has to do with authority, whose authority you'll accept and obey. It has to do with worship, and it has to do with obedience. So these three main issues are at play during this conflict. Broadly speaking, the issue between the mark of the beast and the seal of God is over the law of God. That's the 10 commandments. Drilling down into that, it has to do with the first table of the law, because the 10 commandments were written on 2 tablets of stone. And finally, to zero in on the main issue, the mark of the beast crisis has to do with one specific commandment. I'll explore all of these issues as we proceed in this first part. So viewers, in Exodus 20, God gave the children of Israel 10 commandments. And in Deuteronomy 6 verse 1 onwards, after Moses repeated the law to the people, and in verse 1, he says this. Now these are the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments. So the 10 commandments are the broad law, the moral law. Each commandments have statutes which explain the broad commandments, and each commandment have judgments that are to be executed if people break the commandments. So Moses said this, these are the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments which Jehovah, your God, commanded to teach you, that ye might do them in the land whither ye go to possess it, that thou mightest fear Jehovah thy God, to keep all his statutes and his commandments, which I command thee, thou and thy son and thy son's son, all the days of thy life, and that thy days may be prolonged. Hear therefore, O Israel, and observe to do, that it may be well with thee, and that ye may increase mightily, as Jehovah, God of thy fathers, had promised thee, in the land that floweth with milk and honey. And then Deuteronomy 6 verse 4 is known in Israel as the Shema. It says, hear, O Israel, Jehovah our God is one Jehovah. Hebrew, it is Shema Israel, Jehovah Eloheinu, Jehovah Ehad. It is simply saying that their God is one. And notice verse 5. He says, and thou shalt love Jehovah thy God with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt bind them for a sign, or in other words, thou shalt bind them for a seal, or thou shalt bind them for a mark upon thine hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes. In other words, they shall be in thy mind. So you realize that God is linking the seal of God to the law. So the seal of God is linked to the law of God. And the Creator has promised to put his laws in our minds, which is why the seal is placed in the forehead. So the mark of the beast will essentially be a counterfeit of God's holy law. Notice what is repeated in Hebrews 8 verse 10. He said this, for this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel. After those days, saith the Lord, I will put my laws into their mind. That is why it says, they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes. What is between your eyes? It is your frontal lobe. It is your brain. It is your mind. And I will write them in their hearts. And I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. So notice that the law of God is linked to the seal of God. So notice Isaiah 8 verse 16. God says this, bind up the testimony, and the testimony is another name for the law. Bind up the testimony, seal the law among my disciples. So the law is used to seal God's disciples. Isaiah 8 verse 20 says this, to the law and to the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. So anyone that doesn't keep the law of God or teach that the law of God is done away with, God is telling us clearly that there is no light in them. Notice as well 2 Timothy 2 verse 19. Nevertheless, the foundation of God standeth sure. What is the foundation of God? The scriptures tell us that God's throne is established in righteousness. What is righteousness? Righteousness has to do with law keeping. It has to do with the law. So notice again, the foundation of God standeth sure, having this seal, Lord knoweth them that are his. So when you have the seal of God, when you're obedient to God's commandment, You are telling God that you are his, and God knows you as a result of that. The Lord knoweth them that are his, because they have this seal. And let everyone that nameth the name of Christ depart from iniquity. What is iniquity? According to the scripture, iniquity is lawlessness and unrighteousness. Notice Matthew 7 verse 23 and Luke 13 verse 27. These two verses use the word iniquity, but two separate Greek words are used for the word iniquity. Matthew 7:23 says this, and this is Jesus speaking to supposed Christians or believers who will come to him and say, haven't I done this in your name? And then Jesus said, and then will I profess unto them, I never knew you, because you did not have a seal. Because remember, the foundation of God standeth sure, having this seal, the Lord knoweth them that are his. So if you don't have a seal, Jesus will say to you, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. Or in other words, you that work unrighteousness, you that are lawless. Luke 13 verse 27 says the same thing. So I want now to zoom in on the two Greek words that are translated as iniquity. Strong's G 458 and Strong's G 93. The Greek word used in Mark 7 is anomia. It occurs 15 times in the Greek. It is translated as iniquity 12 times, unrighteousness once, and to transgress the law once, and transgression of the law once. So iniquity means the condition of being without law. In other words, you are a law unto yourself. You are lawless. Either because you are ignorant of the law, which is no excuse, or because you have violated the law. So iniquity is showing contempt and violation of the law. The Greek word that is used in Luke is adikia. It occurs 25 times, and it is translated as unrighteousness 16 times, iniquity 6 times, and so forth. And notice what unrighteousness is described as in the Bible. 1 John 5 verse 17 says, all unrighteousness is sin. And notice what is righteousness. Psalm 119 verse 172 tells us this, for all thy commandments are righteousness. So to keep the commandments is righteousness. To commit iniquity is unrighteousness. And all unrighteousness is sin. But what is sin? The scriptures explains itself, and it provides a definition for sin. And that is found in 1 John 3 verse 4. Whosoever committed sin transgresseth also the law. Why? For sin is the transgression of the law. So that is the definition for sin. Sin is the transgression of the law. Viewers, the main issue that will determine whether a person receives the seal of God or the mark of the beast is the law of God, because the dragon has a conflict with those who keep the commandments of God. Notice what we are told in Revelation 12 verse 17. And the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed. Why? Which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus. So having looked at the law of God, broadly speaking, let's now drill down and look at the first state of the law, because this is the real issue at play. So the first state of the law deals with our relationship to God. It is all about who we worship, how we worship, when we worship, and why we worship God. The first 4 commandments deal with our relationship with God. It has to do with the worship of God. The first commandment says, thou shalt have no other gods before me. The second commandment says, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor worship them. The third commandment says, thou shalt not take the name of Jehovah thy God in vain. And the fourth commandment says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. So these are the 4 commandments on the first state of the law that deal specifically with the worship of God. It is how we relate to God in a spiritual sense. So the 10 commandments are based on love for God, that's the first 4, and love for our fellow man, which is the last 6. So the 10 commandments are predicated upon love. So the first commandment essentially is telling us this. If we love God, then we will not have other gods. The second commandment is saying, if we love God, then we will not worship idols. The third commandment tells us that if we love God, then we will not take his name in vain because his name is holy. And the fourth commandment tells us, if we love God, then we will keep the Sabbath holy. So these four commandments deal with our worship of God. And Jesus Christ, who speaks for the Father, tells us in John 14, verse 15, and he says, if ye love me, keep my commandments. So there you can see that the keeping of God's commandments show us that we love God. God is not into the business of lip service. God is telling us clearly that there's only one way to show your love for him, and that is to keep his commandments. If ye love me, keep my commandments. That's what God is saying. Because the commandments are based on love. And the first four commandments deal with our relationship with God. So those are the four commandments that deals with the love for God. However, the devil also wants to be worshipped, which is the focus of Revelation 13, as can be seen below. So what I've done on screen is to put all the verses in Revelation 13, which deals with the mark of the beast, and show you that the devil wants to be worshipped. So just as how the first four commandments deal with our worship of God, the devil also wants to be worshipped. And he has a problem with the first table of the law. Notice Revelation 13, verse 4. And they worshipped the dragon, and they worshipped the beast. I've highlighted these things in red so they stand out on the screen. So the devil wants to be worshipped. He wants to be worshipped because he's the dragon, and he's using the beast to get worshipped by proxy. And notice as well Revelation 13, verse 8. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him. That's the first beast. Revelation 13, verse 12 speaks about the second beast of Revelation 13, the United States of America, because a beast represents a kingdom. So this second beast, the United States, will cause the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, the papacy. So we have looked at 3 verses so far, and in those 3 verses, worshipped or worship is mentioned 4 times. Revelation 13, verse 15 says this, that the beast will have an image, and he will issue a death decree and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. So viewers, you have seen that Revelation 13, the chapter on the mark of the beast, the theme of that chapter, the central focus of that chapter is worship. Worshipping of the beast and worship of the dragon. So it's all about worship. And those who accept the mark of the beast will be doomed and marked for destruction. Notice Revelation 14, verse 9 to 11. Revelation 14 is a response, really, to Revelation chapter 13. But in Revelation 14, verse 9 to 11, God is now pleading with people and warning people not to worship the beast and his image or receive his mark. Because if you do, this is what is going to happen. If any man worship the beast and his image and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God. So what he's saying here, if you choose to accept the mark of the beast, you'll receive the wrath of God. And it is going to be poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And the smoke of their torment shall ascend up forever and ever, and they have no rest day nor night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. So this is a solemn warning, folks. Revelation 14, 9 to 11 warns against false worship, and those who receive the mark of the beast will violate the first table of the law. Why? Because to worship the first beast is a violation of the first commandment, which says, thou shalt have no other gods before me. So if you choose to worship someone or anything else other than God, you are violating the first commandment. To worship the image of the beast according to Revelation 13, verse 15, is idolatry and is a violation of the second commandment, which says, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, thou shalt not bow down thyself to them nor worship them. This is the same issue that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego faced. They were told to worship an image, a golden image that Nebuchadnezzar set up. And they chose not to worship that image. And a death decree was issued by Nebuchadnezzar that if they did not fall down and worship the image of the beast, because that image represented Nebuchadnezzar, who was the head of the Babylonian kingdom at the time, a death decree was issued against them, that they would be thrown into the burning fire furnace. And the same thing will happen in the end times. So to worship the image of the beast is a violation of the second commandment, which speaks against idolatry. Viewers, the issue cannot be any clearer. That's the second commandment. Revelation 13, verse 6 is a violation of the third commandment dealing with the misuse of God's name. Notice what the beast will do in Revelation 13, verse 6. And he, the beast, opened his mouth in blasphemy against God to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. The third commandment says, thou shalt not take the name of Jehovah thy God in vain. You are not to misuse God's name or abuse God's name. So, viewers, Revelation 13, which we just looked at, focuses squarely on the issue of false worship. So Revelation 14 is a response to false worship. And Revelation 14, verse 7 upholds true worship, which is the worship of God as the creator, on the Sabbath, which stands in opposition to Sunday observance instituted by the Catholic Church, which is also a clear violation of the fourth commandment. Notice Revelation 14, verse 7. It says this. So having looked at Revelation 13, which speaks about worshiping the beast, which is a false way of worshiping, God then says this, fear God and give glory to him. Who is the him? It is God the Father, for the hour of his judgment is come. And what are you supposed to do? Worship him that made heaven and earth, the sea, and the fountains of water. This, the language expressed in Revelation 14, verse 7, takes us back to the fourth commandment, because the fourth commandment tells us who the creator is. And the fourth commandment is the seal of God. It contains his name, his title, and his territory. It is God's seal. It is God's sign. It is his authority. He should be worshipped because he is the creator. And this is what sets him apart from every other creature. He is the one that made heaven, the earth, the sea, and all that in them is. So he has authority without the fourth commandment telling us that God is the creator. Anyone could claim authorship or ownership of creation, but only one being can lay claim to that. And that is why he has the authority, and that is why he's the one that should be worshipped. God is to be worshipped because he's the creator and he's our maker. So viewers, the issue is clear, and that is why God's seal is in the Sabbath commandment, because it contains his name, which gives him his authority. It contains his title, and it contains the territory over which he governs. So let us now look at the final aspect in this first part on the mark of the beast versus the seal of God. Let's now look at why do we worship God and why is the Sabbath so important to God. I won't give any opinions, but I'll allow the Bible, God and his word, to give us the answer. Psalm 95 verse 6 tells us this. O come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before Jehovah our Maker. So Psalm 95 verse 6 is saying that people should come and worship and bow down before Jehovah, that's the name of God, Why? Because he's our maker. Nehemiah 9 verse 6 also says this, thou, even thou art Jehovah alone. And that is why Deuteronomy 6 verse 4 says Jehovah is one. Jehovah alone. Thou hast made the heaven of heavens with all their host, the earth and all things that are therein, the seas and all that is therein. Notice again the same language which speaks about, so Nehemiah 9 verse 6 also contains the seal of God. His name is there, Jehovah. Thou hast made, so he's the creator. What did he make? Heaven, the heaven of heavens, with all their hosts, the angelic hosts, the earth, and all things that are therein, the seas, and all that is therein. And not only that, but God is not only the maker, he's not only the creator, but he is the preserver of all life on earth. Thou preservest them all. And the host of heaven worshipeth thee. So God is being worshipped in heaven because he is the creator. So that is the main reason why God is the only being that deserves to be worshipped, because he's the creator. So viewers, it is clear from these verses that God is worshipped because he's our maker and creator. Psalm 95 verse 6. And worship is inextricably linked, meaning it cannot be separated from creation. So worship is linked to creation, according to Nehemiah 9 verse 6. And the Sabbath is a sign or the seal of the creator, which he uses to seal his creation. So let's now look at Genesis 2, going back to the origin, going back to the beginning. Genesis is the book of beginnings. Genesis 2 verse 1 to 3 says this, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. So here is the genesis of all things. God created this world in 6 days. He rested on the seventh day, and that is why even today we have a 7-day week, because it was instituted by God. So God completed his work on creation in 6 days, and he did 3 things. He rested, he blessed, and he sanctified the 7th day. So the Sabbath still stands as the only day that is set aside for worship. The word sanctified here means to be set aside for holy use, and that holy use is for the worship of the Creator. So the Sabbath is the only day of the 7 that was blessed. No other day was blessed, no other day was sanctified, and God did not rest on any other day. So viewers, there are 7 days in a week, and the first 6 days of the week are working days. So Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday are working days. But the 7th day was blessed and sanctified, meaning it was set aside as a holy day dedicated to rest and worship of the Creator. How do I know that the first 6 days are working days? I didn't come up with this. It is God who created the 7 days. He says this in Ezekiel 46 verse 1. Thus saith the Lord Jehovah. So this is God the Father speaking. He is the one who has the authority to decide which days are working days and which days are rest days and worship days. Thus saith the Lord Jehovah. The gate of the inner court, speaking of the temple, that looketh toward the east, shall be shut the 6 working days. God said so, not me. So the first 6 days are working days. But notice the difference. But on the Sabbath, which day is the Sabbath? The 7th day, it shall be opened. Why should the door of the temple be opened on the Sabbath? Because the Sabbath is a day of rest and worship. Viewers, God uttered these words in the 4th commandment and made it absolutely clear that the 7th day is his holy day. Exodus 20 verse 8 to 11 is the fourth commandment. Notice what God said from his own mouth on Mount Sinai. He said, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shall thou labor, and we just read earlier that the first 6 days are working days. So 6 days shall thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of Jehovah thy God. So question, which day did God say is his day? The seventh day is the Sabbath of Jehovah thy God. It is God's day. Of is a preposition which shows ownership. It is the Sabbath of Jehovah thy God. It is God's day. So when you hear people talk about Sabbath is their day or Sunday is my Sabbath, the Sabbath is God's holy day. It is God's day that he has shared with mankind so that they can rest after 6 days of labor. God did not need a seventh day to rest after the first 6 days of creation. That is why Jesus made it clear that the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. Man was made before the Sabbath. Man was made on the 6th day. So the Sabbath was made for man for rest after 6 days of labor. And that is why the commandment says, 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But on the 7th day is the Sabbath of Jehovah thy God. So it is God's day. It is the only day that God claims ownership of. And that must not be mistaken. As we will see in the next presentation, part 2 of the mark of the beast and the seal of God. So viewers, the 7th day is the Sabbath of Jehovah thy God. It's God's holy day. And notice verse 11. And verse 11 is the one that contains his name, his title, and his territory. Notice why God commands man to keep the Sabbath day holy. For in 6 days, Jehovah, that's his name, made, that's what he did. So his title is the creator, he's the maker. And what did he make? He made the heaven, the earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the 7th day. Wherefore, Jehovah, that's his name, blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. And the next thing that we need to make, next point that we need to make is this, because some people will try to be crafty, acting as if they don't know which day is the 7th day. The law of God tells us which day is the 7th day. The 7th day is the Sabbath of Jehovah thy God. The Sabbath is the 7th day, the 7th day, not the first day. It is the 7th day of the week. So it is the 7th day and it is God's holy day. It's the only day that God claims ownership of. It belongs to him. The seal of God is found in Exodus 20 verse 11, which is a part of the 4th commandment, which speaks about keeping the Sabbath day holy. And it is the only commandment that God says, remember, because God in his infinite wisdom knew that there is going to come a time when people will forget his Sabbath. So he says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. He could say to remember because it was instituted at creation. And God is saying, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. So viewers, these points are clear that the issue in the mark of the beast crisis is over worship, and it's over which day man chooses to worship God on, because it's not about a day. The day is just a means by which God will test people to see whose authority they will obey. So notice, viewers, as I bring this to a close, we have just read that God himself, from his own mouth, from his own lips, said that the 7th day is the Sabbath of Jehovah thy God. However, the Roman Catholic Church, the papacy, the first beast of Revelation 13, that the dragon, the devil, is using to deceive the whole world says differently, based on the decree of Canon 29 issued at the Synod of Laodicea in AD 363 to 364, which outlawed the keeping of the Sabbath and encouraging rest on Sunday. Notice what this canon says, and a canon is a law of the Catholic Church. Canon 29 says this: Christians must not Judaize by resting on the Sabbath, but must work on that day, rather honoring the Lord's day. So whose authority are we going to obey? God said in his law that 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of Jehovah thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor the stranger that is within thy gates. But here the Catholic Church is saying that Christians must not Judaize by resting on the Sabbath, but must work on that day in contravention of what God said, rather honoring the Lord's day. And the Lord's day, according to them, is Sunday, the first day of the week. But which day did I just say God claimed ownership of? It is the Sabbath of is a preposition, Jehovah thy God. So if it's God's day and God is the Lord, he's our Lord and our master because he's our creator. If the Sabbath is his day and he is the Lord, which day then is the Lord's day? It has to be the Sabbath. But the church says differently. The church says it is the first day of the week. So notice what they say here. And let me just read it in its entirety. Christians must not Judaize by resting on the Sabbath, but must work on that day, rather honoring the Lord's day. And if they can, resting then as Christians. But if any shall be found to be Judaizers, meaning they are resting on the Sabbath, let them be anathema from Christ. In other words, the church is saying, let them be accursed. Notice as well the notes on this Canon 29. It says, a Christian shall not stop work on the Sabbath, but on the Lord's day. So they are telling people not to stop working on the Sabbath, but to stop working on Sunday. And notice what is written here by Balsamon. Here the fathers order, notice, the fathers here are the church leaders, they order that no one of the faithful shall stop work on the Sabbath, as do the Jews, but that they should honor the Lord's day on account of the Lord's resurrection. So here you see clearly that they are saying that the Lord's day is linked to the Lord's resurrection. And we know that Jesus, according to the scripture, resurrected on the first day of the week, which is Sunday. So they are saying that the faithful shall not stop work on the Sabbath, as do the Jews, but that they should honor the Lord's day on account of the Lord's resurrection, and that on that day they should abstain from manual labor and go to church. But thus abstaining from work on Sunday, they do not lay down as a necessity, but they add, if they can. For if through need of any other necessity, anyone worked on the Lord's day, this was not reckoned against him. So according to the Roman Catholic Church, the Lord's day is Sunday and not the Sabbath. So viewers, this brings us to the end of part 1 of the mark of the beast and the seed of God. So the issues are clear. The issues have to do with authority, worship, and obedience. It is about the law of God. It is about the first table of the law, which speaks to the worship of God. And specifically, it is about the 4th commandment, one specific commandment, which points to God as creator. It is the fact that God is the creator that gives him the authority to claim worship. So the church now, on the other hand, the Roman Catholic Church, the first beast of Revelation 13, who the devil is using to deceive the whole world, says differently. They are saying that people must not stop working on the Sabbath, in contrary to what God has said. So we have a dilemma here. Whose authority are we going to obey? God says, rest on the Sabbath, work on the first 6 days. The church, on the other hand, says you must not stop working on the Sabbath, but you should rest on Sunday. whose authority are you going to obey? So the issue between the mark of the beast and the seal of God is about whose authority you will obey. God's authority or the devil's authority through the Roman Catholic Church. So we have a choice as individuals to either accept the seal of God by obeying his commandment and keeping the Sabbath holy, or the authority of the church and by keeping Sunday holy. The choice is yours.